household has their television turned on more than 7 hours a day. On average, American children watches 3 to 4 hours a day of television per day. By the time they graduate from high school, children will have spent 50% more time in front of a television set than in front of a teacher. By the time the average American child leaves elementary school, he or she has witnessed 8,000 murders and 100,000 acts of televised violence. Resolve that the media negatively influences today's youth. For this debate, youth would be considered 18 and under. The following are key terms that are critical to this debate. Media, as defined by the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is a medium of cultivation, conveyance, or expression. According to this definition, media can be television, movies, and video games. As defined by dictionary.com, negative is lacking positive or affirmative qualities such as enthusiasm, interest, or optimism. For today's purposes, the aspect of violence and sex depicted on the media will be the focus. There's no doubt that the prevalence of violence and sex depicted on television is very apparent and prevalent. You will have to admit how widespread media is, whether they're TV, movies, or video games. They are everywhere and part of our lives. In fact, in a domestic life, watching television is the most time-consuming and spent activity after sleeping. As much as media can be educational, it can also be detrimental, especially to a vulnerable population who are most easily influenced by it, the youth. The average American child watches 3 to 4 hours a day of TV. The vast majority of this time is spent watching programs not targeted to children's youth. Game shows, soap operas, and MTV. Television makes no distinctions among viewers. If you're 4 years old and able to turn on the television, then you're privy to the same information as a 14-year-old or 40 years old. Television has changed the nature of childhood. It has eradicated many of the traditional barriers that protected children from the harsh facts of adult life. No wonder youngsters who are heavy viewers of television are more pessimistic than light viewers. They have been exposed to a world of violence and sex far beyond their emotional capacities. Among the various incidents proving the harmful effects of media violence and sex, there was an incident where a 9-year-old girl named Olivia Niemi was sexually assaulted in San Francisco. The 4 girls who took part in the attack said they were imitating a scene from Born Innocent, an NBC television movie they watched before committing the crime. My point is, not every teenage child who watches violence on TV will go out and shoot people, but rather it is more about the subtle and little things. Yes, they're not going to shoot people, but it so negatively influences and affects the youth today. The word negative is critical, as it negatively influences today's youth, meaning there are no positive outcomes associated with media violence and sex. For example, a study according to MSNBC says that game violence triggers aggressive attitudes as well as desensitizing them to violence. Here's an image of the brains of the players that were exposed to non-violent games and violent game players. This part of the area of the brain is amygdala, which is a part of the brain where it stimulates emotional arousal. And as you can see, those exposed to violent games has their amygdala aroused, which is involved in emotional arousal. So it desensitizes them, and it's supported by this study and many other various studies. Sex and violence is also critical in media. Sexual depictions in media promote sexism and degrades women in our society. For example, according to US Today, a study showed that advertising media images encourages girls to focus on looks and sexuality, and that is harmful to their emotional and physical health. This study proves that it diminishes their self-esteem, the girl's self-esteem, and can sometimes result in depression as well. Various studies, psychological studies, have proven that media violence and sex is harmful to today's youth. Vote for what's the most beneficial for the mental and health issues of our youth. Vote affirmative.